What's going on, everyone? So, it's no secret, the Phoenix Suns have been struggling mightily. They are currently fluctuating back and forth between the 10 seed and the 11th seed, and really just kind of, flirting with missing the play-in entirely. It's still early in the season. Maybe they have some turnaround. I personally don't see it. I personally don't believe it. I don't think that they have enough to be a real threat. If Bradley Beal gets back, right, they'll be better offensively. But I still don't buy them as a real threat. I talked about it before the season even began, that I didn't think that they had the depth. I didn't think that they had the defense. I didn't think that they had the playmaking to kind of make it all work and balance it all out. And now you're hearing reports and murmurs that Kevin Durant is unhappy. He wants out. And yes, Kevin Durant basically has tried to put that to bed. He did the same thing in Brooklyn. The next thing you know, he ends up getting traded. Right before he made the original trade request, there were talks about him wanting out. Guess what happened? He ended up inevitably wanting out. Same thing with the Warriors, right? He tried to, hush those things until he was ready and then ultimately asked out. And I just don't know how he can at this point. I mean, he can, but it's just, you did this to yourself, man. Kevin Durant handpicked this situation. Literally. He requested and demanded a trade to the Suns. He wanted it to be low key. That's why it came out of left field, because Kevin Durant didn't want this to be a big bidding war and it to be all this spotlight and attention. He just wanted to quietly go to the Suns, or as quietly as possible. And he got his way. And now there's talks that he's upset with the future and the direction of this franchise, as well as, their lack of assets and just their lack of depth and overall talent. It's like, what do you expect? They traded all of it for you. They got Bradley Beal for essentially nothing, for swapping Chris Paul, right? So all of the assets went to go get you. And it's because you had to have it. You wanted it low key, which means the Phoenix Suns didn't have a ton of leverage. It just put Phoenix in a position where they had to go do this. And it's not like Matt Ishbia didn't have to go get Bradley Beal. That was a terrible mistake. But Kevin Durant wanted Bradley Beal, right? There were all the reports. Kevin Durant, handpicked, was super adamant about going and getting his buddy Bradley Beal. Guess what? You got Bradley Beal, even through all the injury concerns, even through knowing that there was going to be all these problems with, depth and finances, you didn't care. And the problem is that Kevin Durant keeps building these teams. He's done it now in Brooklyn. He did it. He's doing it in the Phoenix Suns. And the only real success he had was with the Golden State Warriors. And if you look at the Nets teams and you look at the Suns teams that he's tried to build, he's trying to replicate Golden State, right? He's looking at it as, the last time I had this high-powered, skilled offense, I had the easiest time of my career scoring the basketball, and we were able to run through the league, and we were literally unbeatable. So he's looking at it as, if I get, yes, they may not be Steph and Clay, but if I get these high-skilled, high-powered, high-versatile offensive weapons, they're going to take the attention and distraction off of me, and I'll be more effective, and thus in return they'll be more effective, and then we'll run through the league like we did with Golden State. But it's the way that Golden State was structured. It was the way in which Golden State was kind of fell into this loophole that may never happen again. And they had a guy like a Draymond Green. Right, so you didn't need a traditional point guard. You were able to get away with Steph not really being more of a shooting guard than a point guard. Yes, he can make plays and stuff, but no, he's historically been more of a two guard than a point guard. And you also keep in mind, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson didn't need the ball in their hands. Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are probably the most scary players. I mean, you can make an argument ever in the history of the league when they are off the ball and the ball isn't in their hands. I mean, Klay Thompson has a 50-point game where he took 3 dribbles or whatever, right? dude, these two guys didn't need to have the basketball. Kevin Durant doesn't need to have the basketball a ton. He's so efficient, so effective. His ability to play off the ball, his ability to kind of just take a dribble and then get to his spot and boom, elevate. It wasn't this move like you saw in Brooklyn, right? Again, if you think I'm wrong, take a second and really think about it. You had Steph, Clay, and Kevin Durant. 3 high-powered, offensive-oriented players. Look, Klay Thompson, especially back then, before injuries and stuff, was an excellent defender, right? James Harden, Kyrie, never really that. But Devin Booker was. Devin Booker was one of the best defensive guards in the league last year, right? So, but it's more so the offensive versatility, right? These high-powered, skilled offensive guys. The most success he ever had was with that. You look at the OKC days. They make it to the finals with James Harden and Russell Westbrook. And Russell Westbrook was kind of like he wasn't really super versatile, skilled offensively, right? He was more just Energizer Bunny, get to the basket at will through his athleticism and explosiveness, right? He could shoot better, which is weird. He could shoot better earlier in his career than he did later in his career. But again, he's looking at it as okay, I had a guy in Russell Westbrook who was limited offensively, and we were just never able to get over the top. We kept losing to teams like the Warriors that had all this offensive versatility. So I go to the Warriors, and what happens? Boom. We're a powerhouse offensively. So he goes to Brooklyn, teams up with Kyrie, when he could have went to other places that made more sense, and he probably would have won a championship with. He wanted to go build a super team with his buddy Kyrie in Brooklyn. So they did it. And then James Harden comes because it was again, I have James Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant, right? And look, Brooklyn had some success, and Brooklyn will probably always go down as one of the greatest what ifs because they had an amazing record when the three of them worked, right? And they played together, but you knew the risk. You knew James Harden vanishing in the playoffs, the time he was having those injury issues, Kyrie disappearing at times and just not play-wise, but literally just not showing up to games or practices or, just being a distraction. You knew everything when you got into bed with these guys. And you also built a highly offensive team that didn't have the defense to necessarily get the stops needed when you needed to. And so now you go to the Phoenix Suns, and once again, he's trying to replicate that. But he's missing out on all the other things that made the Warriors work, such as Draymond Green, who was their playmaker. He was the guy. You were able to have KD, Clay, and Steph, and all of them work offensively. Because again, neither of them needed the ball. And they all were excellent off the ball. And you had a guy in Draymond who could initiate the offense and get these guys the ball. And made sure everybody ate. And made sure everyone worked out. Right? And Phoenix, you don't have that. Even in Brooklyn, why was Brooklyn so successful? They had their concerns and struggles early on too. But what happened? Kyrie and James Harden had that interview, right? And what did Kyrie say? We talked. I'm going to be the shooting guard. He's going to be the point guard. He's going to make the plays. And James Harden just took on the playmaker role, right? He scored and had his buckets occasionally. But for the most part, he just became point god. And it started clicking. Right? Because you had that guy that made the decision, okay, I'm going to be just the playmaker. I'll get my buckets here and there, but I'm going to focus on playmaking. And James Harden is excellent at that too. Right? And then Kyrie, his ability to play off the ball, he played alongside LeBron James. As soon as he made that sacrifice of, okay, I don't need the ball in my hands as much as I have had. I've played with a guy like LeBron, so I can play off the ball. KD, again, being super efficient, doesn't need 40 shots to get you 20 points, right? All of a sudden that started to make sense and it was clicking. But you look at Phoenix and it's Bradley Beal isn't a playmaker. He can make the occasional play. He can hit the open man. He can find the occasional cutter. But he's not. There's a big difference between playing point guard and being a point guard, right? Devin Booker right now is playing point guard, and you see the struggles. He doesn't have that understanding and balance, right? He doesn't see the court the way that a point guard does. He doesn't, he's not able to allow to create things and make things develop on his own. Bradley Beal's going to come in and he's going to do the same thing because he's never had to do that. Could they evolve into that? Sure. Right? They're very talented, they're very skilled, they're very gifted, but it ain't happening this year. It's not. It's going to take some time. You're going to have some trials and errors. You're going to lose a bunch of games, right? It's going to take some time for them to balance it out. But the depth and everything with that. If Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant fit like a glove, then sure. But the problem is Kevin Durant, he got too many of the same player. Like, again, James Harden, he's different, right? He can play that point guard role and still go get you buckets and do it efficiently, right? Kyrie is just an absolute wizard with the basketball. But there were still some redundancies with those three. You still saw some of the issues. But you look at the Warriors, and it's like Klay Thompson is your perfect, prototypical, if you built him in a lab, 3-and-D style guy. Doesn't need the ball in his hands. He can guard the best player on the other team. Back then, right? Guard the best player on the other team and just knock down threes. Then you had Steph, who was just a wizard, excellent off the ball, could make plays, had good vision, could do all that stuff, but just hyper efficient, lights out, greatest shooter ever. And then you had Kevin Durant, who arguably the greatest just scorer ever, right? And you put those together and it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then you had Draymond to kind of balance it all out. They don't have that balancing act, right? Like, if Kevin Durant wants to win a championship, go to like Minnesota, right? Trade Kevin Durant for Karl Anthony Towns. I think that'd be beneficial for both sides. You probably give up something else besides Towns, but like have that kind of be the package. Then you have Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert, and Kevin Durant, right? Now you are already one of the best teams in the league, and Kevin Durant would be a home run. I might actually make a video about that because I actually think that's the best fit. But the reason I mention them is because now you have differences. Anthony Edwards has the ability he could shoot, but he's also more dynamic. He applies the rim pressure. He's athletic. He does different things that Kevin Durant doesn't do, right? Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, they can get to the rim, but they're not those explosive get to the rim type guards. They're not like a Ja Morant, an SGA, Anthony Edwards, right? Even to a lesser degree, like a Zach LaVine, right? They're more mid-range, step backs, right? When they do get to the rim, they're looking for contact, right? Like Devin Booker and Bradley Beal are almost identical players. And so you have this redundancy. But if you go to a team, like I mentioned, where like Minnesota, well, now it's you and Anthony Edwards as the 1-2 punch offensively. You got that defensive anchor and Rudy Gobert. You got that playmaker, veteran, glue guy that can bring it all together in like something like that would be great. You still need positions, right? Like even the Warriors, like I mentioned, you still had the playmaker in Draymond. You still had the defensive anchor, right? You still had, the shooter. You still had the defensive guy. You still had the switchability. You had these different elements. Look at all the teams that have won championships, right? Look at Denver last year. They have, their point guard, rim pressure, can get to the basket, right? Can hit the mid-range, right? Like make plays a little bit, right? Do all that stuff. But he's not great at making plays. He's not he's not Chris Paul, right? He's more of a shooting guard than a point guard at times. But guess what? You got Jokic, who is arguably the greatest playmaking big man we've ever seen and can go get you buckets. He's not great defensively, but he's great at everything else, right? And then you look at what are the complementary pieces. Oh, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, arguably one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league right now. super veteran, efficient, smart, good IQ, gets after it, hustles, plays the right way. You look at, Michael Porter Jr., sizable, 3-and-D style, quick, athletic, young, talented, right? Each piece is different. Then you got Aaron Gordon, not a great shooter, but hyper athletic, strong, rim pressure, rim threat, right? Can defend the best player on the other team, can make some plays out of the post, right? Got this balance. Look at even the Milwaukee Bucks, right? You got Giannis, just dynamic in every way, defensive juggernaut, all that stuff. You got his complement and Brook Lopez, spread the floor, pass the ball, score around the rim, right? You got Chris Middleton, do a little bit of every 3-and-D style, hit the mid-range, knock down the three ball. You got this versatile Swiss Army knife type guy. Then you got Drew Holiday, the ultimate glue guy, 3-and-D style point guard, one of the best on-ball defensive guards in the league. Right? You look at this. You look at the teams that win. They have these complements. They have this balance. Look at Boston. Why are they just running through the league right now? Because they have the perfect balance. All 5 of their guys do similar things, but are very different in very different ways. They all complement. They play both sides of the basketball, all of that stuff, right? Again, you look at Minnesota, who's been the best team in the West. Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, right? You got defensive-minded guards, but they're also one super dynamic, up-and-coming superstar. The other one's a savvy veteran, does different things, right? You got the 3-and-D, arguably best on-ball defender in the league. You got Rudy Gobert, who, the defensive anchor. You got Karl Anthony Towns, that is just Swiss Army knife on offense, right? Like, you got the balance. Phoenix doesn't have the balance, and they're not going to. And Kevin Durant is going to end up sticking around. And eventually what's going to happen is either he's going to want out, Devin Booker's going to want out, or Phoenix is just going to say, you know what, we need to just trade everybody because it's not going to work, and we might as well get our value while we can. And then they're going to hit the reset button. They mortgage their future. Luckily, you're going to be able to get most, if not more, back. Just because Kevin Durant's going to go for a fortune, and so will Devin Booker if you trade him. Problem is you're stuck with Bradley Beal. Who's taking on Bradley Beal's contract? Who's taking on Bradley Beal and his just injury history, at least until he gets to the last year of his deal or whatever, and a team maybe goes, okay, well, we'll just buy him out. But right now, if you try to trade Bradley Beal this season, who's taking Bradley Beal this season? He's played 2 games this year. Nobody's taking Bradley Beal this year. Right? So, I don't know, they're either A, you're going to have to trade Kevin Durant and get the pieces you need to make it make sense next to Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, or you need to pray that the Warriors trade or buy out Chris Paul. Or if they don't buy him out, they trade him, and whoever they trade him to ends up buying him out. And then you convince him to come, and then he can be the guy to piece it all together. You're going to be incredibly small, but you'll probably be more effective, right? Because they need that guy to put it all. Another great example on a smaller scale, because they're just not as talented. Look at the Bulls, right? The Bulls have been terrible, right? Zach LaVine is likely on his way out. Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan don't seem to work, right? They conflict. They're too similar. They have their differences, but they're still very similar. They both kind of want to do the same thing. But when did it work? When were they really good and people were like, oh, wait a minute, this team might be a contender? When they had Lonzo Ball, the glue guy, the guy that was the playmaker that was able to put it all together. He was also their best defender, on-ball defender, make plays. He also improved his three-point shot. He was shooting 42% or whatever before he got hurt. See my point? Anyway, again, how you feel, whatever your thoughts are, let me know down in the comments below.